My name is Holly Crawford, and I am 26 years old. And the night my appendix burst, I called my parents 17 times from my kitchen floor while I was losing consciousness, and nobody answered. And the only reason I am alive to tell you this story is that my neighbor, a retired woman named Mrs. Patton, who barely knew my name, heard me collapse through the thin apartment wall and called 911 without hesitating for a single second. I want to start with the floor, because the floor is where this story begins, and because everything that came after, the hospital and the surgery, and the man named Gerald, and the flower arrangement on the windowsill, and my mother's voice saying, "That's odd," when she saw it, all of it has its roots in those 17 unanswered calls and the specific feeling of lying on cold tile at 2 in the morning, understanding that the people who were supposed to come were not coming. I had been feeling off all evening, a dull ache in my lower right side that I kept dismissing as gas or something I ate. By 2 in the morning, the dull ache had become something else entirely, the kind of pain that makes you crawl across the floor. I could not stand. I could not breathe properly. I was sweating through my shirt and gripping the edge of my bathroom sink and staring at my own reflection like I was watching someone else fall apart. I called my mother first. No answer. I called my father. Straight to voicemail. I kept calling back and forth, both of them, my hands trembling so badly I could barely tap the screen. By call 17, I was lying flat on my kitchen tile with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to my father's voicemail greeting for the third time that hour. "You have reached David Crawford. Leave a message." I left 3 messages, each one more desperate than the last. The last one, I was crying so hard I do not know if the words came out right. I said, "Dad, I think I am dying. Please come." Nobody came. The paramedics told me afterward that my appendix had already burst by the time they arrived. They said another 30 minutes on that floor and the outcome would have been very different. They did not say the word death directly. I understood what they meant. In the ambulance, I heard them talking to each other in the specific, efficient language of medical professionals managing something serious. I remember the ceiling of the ambulance moving above me and thinking very clearly that I had spent my entire adult life making sure I was someone people could count on, and that the night I needed to be counted on, I had 17 missed calls and a cold kitchen floor. On the operating table, my heart stopped. The team brought me back. I did not see a white light. I experienced a deep, absolute silence, and then suddenly there was noise again, machines beeping and someone calling my name, and unbearable pain in my chest from the compressions. When I woke up in the recovery room, there was a nurse sitting beside me. I asked her if my parents had come. She looked at me with an expression I will never forget. It was not pity exactly, it was close. The surgeon came in before the nurse could finish explaining. Dr. Reeves, calm eyes, steady voice, the kind of man who pulls a chair close to the bed when he has something serious to say, because he has learned that standing while delivering difficult information creates a distance that does not serve anyone. He told me I had had a very serious night. He told me they had almost lost me. I nodded. I already knew that part. Then he said something I was not prepared for. He said a woman claiming to be my mother had come to the hospital that night. He said she had attempted to have me discharged early. I stared at him. I thought I had misheard. Discharged early. I had just flatlined on a table. He held my gaze and continued. She was told that was not possible given my condition. She became argumentative with the staff. I felt the room tilt slightly. He paused, glanced briefly toward the door, and said, "But the man who paid your bill," and before he could finish that sentence, the door opened. Standing in the doorway was a man I had never seen before in my life, somewhere in his mid-50s, broad-shouldered, a simple gray jacket and dark trousers, kind eyes, the sort of eyes that carry weight without being heavy. He was not flashy. He did not look important at first glance. He looked like somebody's quiet, dependable father. He stepped inside slowly, almost hesitantly, like he wasn't sure he had the right to be there. Dr. Reeves stood up, nodded at him respectfully, and excused himself, leaving the two of us alone. I pulled my hospital blanket up slightly, and I asked him who he was. He sat down in the chair Dr. Reeves had just left and folded his hands. He said his name was Gerald Mays. He told me he had been in the hospital that night visiting his own brother on a different floor when he overheard the commotion at the front desk. He said a woman, my mother, had been loudly demanding that the staff release me because, and he quoted her directly, her other daughter's baby shower was in the morning and the whole family needed to be home. Gerald said the nurses had refused. They had explained that I was in critical post-operative care and that discharging me could cost me my life. He said my mother's response to that was to ask whether there was paperwork she could sign to override the medical decision. He watched the whole thing from 20 feet away, a complete stranger. He said something shifted in him that he could not explain. He asked a nurse quietly what was happening with the patient in question. He saw that no family member went to sit with me. He watched my mother leave the building. He walked to the billing desk and asked what my situation was. When he learned that I had no one present and that my insurance had a gap that would create an immediate financial hold on my continued care, he paid it. Just like that, a complete stranger paid my hospital bill so that the staff could continue treating me without administrative interruption. I did not know what to say. I genuinely did not have words. I had just been told that my mother tried to pull me out of a hospital bed the night I flatlined so that she could be rested for a baby shower. And now a man whose last name I had not known 5 minutes ago was sitting beside me, telling me he had quietly made sure I stayed alive. I started crying. Not softly, the ugly, broken kind that comes from somewhere deep you normally keep locked. Gerald did not try to stop me or tell me everything was fine. He just sat there, which was exactly the right thing to do. Later that day, my parents arrived. My mother walked in first. Her opening words were that she had not heard her phone because it was on silent. 17 calls. She had not heard them. She then looked around the room and asked why there was a flower arrangement on the windowsill. Gerald had left it before he went back upstairs to his brother. I told her a stranger had bought it. She said, "That is odd." She never asked why a stranger was involved at all. My father stood near the door the entire visit, with his arms crossed, nodding at things my mother said, never once sitting down beside me. They stayed 40 minutes and left because, as my mother put it, there was still cleanup from the baby shower. She said my sister had a beautiful morning and that I would have loved it. I lay in that hospital bed after they left, and I thought about 17 calls and a kitchen floor and a man named Gerald who had overheard something at a front desk and decided without hesitation that the right thing to do was to walk to the billing desk and pay the bill of a stranger he had never met. I thought about my mother leaving a hospital where her daughter had just flatlined, and the word she had used when she saw the flower arrangement. That is odd. Not who sent these, not why is there a stranger sending flowers to my daughter's hospital room, just that it was odd. The word odd is what you use when something does not fit the pattern of your expectations. My mother's pattern apparently did not include the possibility that a stranger might care more about her daughter's survival than she had demonstrated that night. Gerald visited me 2 more times before I was discharged. On the last visit, he brought his wife, Patricia, a warm woman who held my hand and said something I have thought about every single day since. She said, "You have people, sweetheart. You just have not met all of them yet." I found out later, through the nurses, that Gerald had also formally reported my mother's discharge attempt to the hospital's patient advocacy office. He did not tell me himself. He was not the kind of man who needed credit for doing the right thing. The hospital documented it. It meant that if anything had gone wrong that night due to outside interference, there was a record. That detail matters to me. Not because I wanted consequences for my mother, because Gerald had thought of it. He had understood, without anyone asking him to, that what he witnessed needed to exist somewhere beyond his memory. He made it official. He made it real. He made it permanent. I did not know people like that existed outside of the stories you tell yourself to feel better about the world. Gerald was not a story I told myself. He was a man in a gray jacket who folded his hands and sat down in a chair and told me the truth about what he had seen and what he had done about it. The weeks after discharge were the hardest in a different way from the hospital itself. The hospital had been physical. The weeks after were the reckoning. My mother called twice. The first time, she said she hoped I was feeling better and mentioned that the baby shower photos had turned out beautifully. The second time she called, she said she felt I was being unfair in my silence and that she wanted me to understand the stress she had been under trying to support my sister's pregnancy, and that families went through hard times and communication was important. Communication, the word landed in a specific way. I had called 17 times. She had not answered. I had been on a kitchen floor, dying. She had come to the hospital, not to sit beside me, but to ask for paperwork to release me so she could be home for a morning event. And the word she was using now was communication. I did not call her back after the second message. My father sent a text. He said, "Your mother is very hurt by your attitude." I read it once and put my phone face down on the counter and made a cup of tea. What I was processing in those weeks was not anger. Anger is a response to something unexpected. What had happened to me was not unexpected, not really. What it was clear. For the first time in my life, I could see the pattern in full, rather than in the partial way I had been seeing it my entire life, forgiving the parts that were visible and making excuses for the gaps. I had been making excuses for the gaps for 26 years. The gap that opened on a kitchen floor at 2 in the morning, 17 calls deep, had finally become too large to explain away. Gerald and Patricia came to visit me at home 3 weeks after discharge. Patricia brought food. Gerald sat in my kitchen and asked how I was doing, not medically, actually. He asked what I was thinking about. I told him the truth, that I was trying to figure out what to do with the information I now had about my family. He did not offer advice. He said, "You do not have to figure it all out at once." I said, "I know." He said, "We will come back next week." And they did. They came back the following week and the week after that, not because they had decided to adopt me in any formal sense, because they were people who, when they became part of someone's story, did not immediately find a reason to step back out. They simply showed up. That is the thing nobody tells you about the people who save your life. It is not the one dramatic moment that defines them. It is the Tuesday evenings afterward when they show up to sit in your kitchen and ask how you are doing and mean it. I am fully recovered now. The scar from the surgery is something I have learned to view not as evidence of what happened to my body, but as a record of the night the clarity arrived. Some records are internal, some are visible. Mine is about 3 inches long on my lower right side, and it is the most honest thing my body has ever held. My relationship with my parents is something I am still navigating, and I want to be honest about that, because the version of this story that ends with a clean resolution is a version that lies about how long it actually takes to recalibrate a lifetime of learned patterns. I have not cut them off. I have not had the dramatic confrontation. What I have done is stopped performing the relationship and started examining what is actually there and deciding month by month what I am willing to give and what I am not. What I know now that I did not know before the kitchen floor is the difference between being loved and being assumed. For 26 years, I had been assumed. The people who assumed me had my number in their phones under the word daughter and answered when it was convenient, and did not answer 17 times when it was not, and came to the hospital afterward not to hold my hand, but to ask a nurse for override paperwork. The people who loved me were the ones who showed up without being asked. Mrs. Patton, who heard me through a wall and called 911 without knowing my last name. Gerald, who watched a woman leave a hospital without sitting with her own child and could not make himself do nothing. Patricia, who held my hand and said, "You have people, sweetheart. You just have not met all of them yet." I think about that sentence every day, not because it is comforting in a vague, general sense, but because it is specifically and precisely true. The people I had always thought of as my people, the ones with the legal and biological claim, had shown me their priorities on the night when priorities could not be hidden, and the people who had no claim at all, no obligation, no history, no reason, had shown me something else entirely. Family is a word I use very differently now, not as a category based on origin, as a description of behavior. Gerald and Patricia are family. Mrs. Patton is family. The nurse who sat beside my bed and looked at me with that expression that was not quite pity when I asked if my parents had come, she is family, in the way that people become family when they are present for the moments that matter. My parents are something else, something I am still finding the right word for. Not enemies, not strangers, something in between that requires more nuance than most language gives you room for. What I want you to take from this story is not that your family is bad or that strangers are good. It is something simpler and more specific. The night I nearly died, I found out exactly whose hands were holding me and whose hands I had only believed were there. Both pieces of that information were worth having. One of them was devastating. One of them gave me Gerald and Patricia and Mrs. Patton and a Tuesday evening kitchen table and a woman saying, "You have people, sweetheart," in a way that made me understand for the first time what that phrase was actually supposed to mean. You have people. You just have not met all of them yet. I believed her. I still do. That is my story. Drop your city in the comments, hit subscribe. I will see you in the next one.